Hey there, sports fans. I'm trying to figure out how to do a little bit of a better job getting visibility on the back side of my race car. I've got a little 2007 Mazda MX-5 here, been modified just a little bit with a little over 300 horsepower. And there's a little bit of difficulty seeing out of the back of this car when I'm driving. And so I've got a roll bar and I've got a very small window, and of course I got the wing right here in the way as well. I do have a nice mirror, you can see it from here, but it's a very small area that I can look through, and I'm trying to increase my situational awareness. Being new to racing in the last couple of years, I'm thinking, I could do a better job. So today's project for me is to mount one of my cameras on the back of the car and then run it to a TFT display that'll be on while I'm driving, and so I can record and see a little bit better while I continue to keep the mirror up. All right, so I think the first thing to know is what equipment am I using? Well, I'm kind of a Garmin fan, but I think you could do this with a GoPro as well. So what I have here is a Garmin Verb Ultra. It's a little dirty from motorcycle riding as well. And I am going to use the full protective case, but it is going to wind up requiring some holes that I'm going to use a Dremel to put in the side here to connect both the external display, and I'm going to go ahead and wire up constant power. One weakness to all of these cameras, in my opinion, is that battery power is very lacking. And with 25 to 30 minute sessions and then having to recharge is a real pain. So I'm gonna just hardwire it in for some power. I'm using a Garmin mount here for this one. However, Garmin will allow a GoPro mount as well. So I'm just gonna stick this to the back of the car, which you'll see in just a little bit. I'll drill a hole in the back of the car. It's a race car, so I really don't care. And then I'm going to run the wires. Now, as far as how I'm going to connect it, or the TFT display, let me start there first. This is a little cheap TFT display made in China. I got it off of Amazon. I'll put the link down below, but I don't think it was more than 50 bucks. I mean, it's pretty inexpensive stuff. And so it's just a nice little display here. It did come with a mount, which I already have in the car, but here's the plastic for it. I'm just gonna mount this on the dash and put it right next to the steering area. So I look out, I'll be able to see it and still check my mirror as well. It does have HDMI, and then it came with a cable here that goes over to RCA, which I decided that I'm going to use the HDMI cable. So as a result of that, I did buy an HDMI to micro USB, and that's this cable right here. It's about, 15 feet long or so. Yep, 15 feet long, and the micro USB side looks like this right here. So that plugs right into the HDMI side of the camera. And then what I'm going to use the regular USB port for is this cable right here. This is a standard mini, I think that's a mini USB. I can never keep them all straight anymore, to just a USB. Now the way I'm going to use the USB, I'm using this strictly for power. In fact, I'm not even going to put a battery in this anymore, so it doesn't confuse, even though there is a setting to change it from battery and so on over to charge, but I don't like that. In fact, I've missed out on some video that I would have loved to have had with this, with setting this thing up. So with all of that being said, I do have a Verb remote that I'll be operating it off of. This is a cool thing here. So I don't know if you're familiar with battery tenders, the battery tender, but I love that thing. And this has I think this is called a SAE connector. And so I'm going to use the SAE connector that goes over to this waterproof USB, and I'm going to mount this in the trunk because my battery's in the trunk. And so I'll have that to where I can connect it. Here's the other end of that, where it'll just go to the terminals of the battery, and then it'll plug in. The only danger there is I got to remember to unplug it since it's plugged in directly, otherwise I'll wind up with a dead battery. All of this stuff, I should exclude the camera, it was less than $100. And so like this is 10 bucks or something like that. If you look up SAE to USB, you'll find this on Amazon as well. Now I did also purchase the audio video cable connector for the Garmin, thinking that I would need this. And this allows the RCA connection and external power as well. And it also allows a mic in, and I think it has a sound out. I've decided I'm not going to use this, although it would work. It's a big cluster of stuff to have hanging out on the back of the car. I'm not real happy about that, so I don't really need it. Since I'm going to go HDMI to micro USB, I'd rather have that connection. I'm going to go ahead and get started working and putting this all together. So I do have a couple of different mounting choices, and I've looked at all of them, and I've ultimately decided that I'm going to go on the back of the car where the license plate goes. I thought about putting it up here, but then I just wondered if it'd be too high. I'd have to drill a hole perhaps in the deck lid, which if it rains, that's a little bit more of an issue while I'm driving. I thought about putting it on the bumper as well, but ultimately I think I would like the compactness of having it right here. So I'm just going to use the double sticker and I'm just going to put it right here. And then I'll drill a hole on the back of this, which has a little bit of protection to go inside so I can route my cables to the inside of the car. I'm gonna go ahead and do that part now. Well, that wasn't too difficult. I got a little hole here now and I just found a little rubber grommet and I stuck it in there. Probably gonna wind up epoxying this somehow just to seal it up. Although it would be underneath the license plate if I ever put one back on it. I'm gonna go ahead and mount the camera mount to this now. And then I'm going to work on cutting the holes in the Garmin mount as well. Of course, that was not too difficult, and I pressed it in there pretty hard. I'm probably going to put a tether around this as well, just in case that double-sided sticky stuff comes loose. Boy, I sure don't want to hit another vehicle while we're out doing what we do. And I do like how this turned out. I mean, it's flush back into the bumper as well, so it's really not obtrusive. I can adjust the angle appropriately, and I have the release on the upper side of the Garmin mount. So make sure you do that also with your GoPro if you do that way, just to make sure you can get it on and off appropriately. Looks like I have dry skin, but I've also scored the areas where I'm going to try to cut through this with a Dremel. I'm just using a Dremel with a cutting bit. Looks like I got some residual plastic on here from the last time I did something like this. Take your time doing this. I love the Dremel tool, but it can be a little precarious. So I'm just going to cut those holes open, make sure that the cables are going to fit through, and then I'm going to start small and go up a little bit larger just to make sure I don't wind up with a big gaping hole there. And again, I'll probably, I don't know, well, actually I won't be able to seal these, so I just want to be careful not to get them too big. I certainly visualized this better than it turned out. Looks like I have the skills of an HMO dentist. When you're ready for that cavity to be filled, let me know. It is going to work, although I left a little bit of a gap there. So it should be a little bit easier to plug those cables in once the camera's inside. Okay, you know what? That turned out pretty good. You know, for an average guy. Cables go in through the little hole there. The mount is working well. So, you know, just a couple of minor things, maybe cosmetically to clean up. Then I'm going to twisty tie these cables together, make sure they're secure, get one to the front, to the dash for the display, and get the other one into the battery. All right, so it's pretty easy, but I attached the SAE connector to the battery directly. And so I just plugged it into my battery tender to make sure that it works. Not a whole lot of brain surgery going on there. It does. So now I'm going to mount the USB to it to draw power when I need it, and just make sure that it powers up the camera. That worked. So everything's good as far as my connection goes. This actually does 2 USBs, which is really, really cool. It does come with a little bit of a mount and some sticky here. So I've got to secure everything so nothing's rattling around while I'm racing around the track. I'm going to do all of that and clean it up here in just a minute. All right, I'm looking down in the trunk and I've got my 2 cables coming from the outside to the inside and routed and kind of cleaned up in here a little bit, just using twisty ties and routing along with some of the other wiring and so on. And of course I have my connector over here for the actual connection to the USB. I put the USB piece right down here, and so I'll be able to plug in my power right there, or unplug it, of course, as well. I am going to leave it unplugged unless I'm using it, just simply because a small drain on this little bitty battery seems to kill it. Plus, it's already bulged out anyways, kind of like me. Well, looky here. So what I decided to do inside the car is I attached another, I got duct tape on it right now, but another GoPro mount, actually another Garmin mount here. I'm letting the epoxy dry because this thing's not real heavy, but you know, it's a kind of awkward pulling over and what have you. So I'm just letting it dry up, probably a good now. Anyways, and then I routed my cable up through the inside of the car. Of course, again, you know, it doesn't really matter what it looks like in here. But the HDMI cable comes from the back, and then I wired it into the accessory switch. So if I shut that off, she all goes away. And when I turn it back on, it all comes back. At least I think it does. So, yep, there we go. And so I just took my little Garmin Verb remote. I put it down here. So I believe if I hit that button, get a couple of visual indicators that I believe it's working and it's recording, I should be set and ready to go. So pretty happy about all of that. You know, then I still got the mirror up here so I can check both. It's not really obscuring my view because this is about where my eyes are. And so it's not over the dash of the car, which I was worried about that as well. So important for it to be in a place where it doesn't obscure my view on the front side of the car while I'm driving. You know, the only other concern I have is that this is kind of flimsy and loose and the car shakes and vibrates and bumps and everything else. So I'm just gonna have to try it out and see how well it works, and I may have to come up with a more secure mount. I did take a standard camera mount down here and I screwed it into the bottom of this because the brace that they gave me came with something similar. And so that's this right here. And you can see that the threading is a little bit different than a standard camera mount. But I went ahead and let it kind of cross-thread itself in there. It was nice and tight. And this thing, again, is pretty loose. The only thing I need to do is kind of clean up my cables here just a little bit. And I should be set and ready to go. Thanks for watching.